Hey, we are two Star Wars nerds, and today we are hoping to build a case for why Revenge of the Sith is George Lucas's masterpiece. And, if you're not subscribed already, hit that red subscribe button because we have giveaways at every single one of our sub goals. And we have like a prequel live stream just to love and appreciate the prequels with some really awesome people coming up.
Yeah.
And we just make a lot of fun Star Wars content that we personally enjoy. At the end of the day, this is just like a nerd love passion project.
Yes.
That's really all this is. And we're just having fun.
Yep.
Diving deep into Star Wars. But I want to read this quote before we get going that sets context for masterpiece, because when we're talking about art in particular, the word masterpiece holds some certain weight, because a lot of times people will be like, oh, this is a masterpiece, and we just kind of apply it to a lot of things.
Right.
But I love this quote because I think it encapsulates what this means. It says, this is from Kojo Griffin. He's an extremely famous and talented painter. He says, to me, a masterpiece is the intersection of skill, practice, conceptual depth, and what I would loosely term vision. That thing which drives people to create. Speaking my language right there. And so we're thinking about that. Can we say Revenge of the Sith is the intersection of George Lucas's skill, practice, conceptual depth, and not his conceptual death. Oh gosh, his conceptual depth. There's that P. And his vision, is that driving him to create? Is the Revenge of the Sith the pinnacle point in George Lucas's career? We think so. Because let's just break this down as best as we can. And we're going to try and keep this a concise video so we just don't go on forever about this. But here's the thing. Right off the bat, you're dropped straight into a rich narrative.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy. And we've talked about this in other films. I mean, like, you're like, especially the prequels, you're just dropped in
A lot.
But I mean, just for you, we literally just rewatched this for who knows how many times tonight. What did you think, like, just right off the bat with being dropped into a story?
I love that as a beginning, because you wouldn't always think of that being a good beginning, but I actually like it because it really catches your attention and you're like, wait, what's going on? Like, you're invested in the story, you're trying to figure things out. So I think it's actually a really smart way to begin a story. Is like, yeah, it's not halfway through the story maybe, but like you're you've walked a couple steps in, or you're starting to run in and you're like, okay, what's going on? What are we doing? I think it's a very smart way to begin a movie like Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, I think so too, because typically stories want to build. You have this unassuming character and these events start happening and things start ramping up. But instead, George Lucas is like, no, I am not holding back. I am throwing you into the deep end. And really what it does, if you think about Yoda in the end of Attack of the Clones, he says, begun the Clone Wars have.
Yep.
And, we see all the clones, we see the garrisons, we see everything, and we hear the music, and we're like, oh man, here it goes, right? And then, like, before the Clone Wars TV show, in theaters, you're sitting there, and all of a sudden, you're deep into the Clone Wars. Right. You're actually at, like, the end of the Clone Wars. You're like, wait, I heard there was a reference to the Clone Wars in A New Hope. And we have Attack of the Clones. They say begun the Clone Wars have. And then we think we're getting in. We are, like, thrown in. And it's just like, wow, what just happened? And he's setting this. He's leaving so much space to be able to create something else that's great. But what I love is there's all of these references that you're expected to know. And it's like, oh yeah, well, at this battle, that doesn't count. And,
right.
Castle Nemoidia, and, all this stuff. And it's like, wait, what is that? Because at the time, nobody knew. And why I think that's great is because George has practiced this enough to know that's what his fans want.
Yeah.
His fans want that lore, that depth, that hunger. Star Wars fans are insatiable. We just want more and more and more.
It's true.
Yeah. I mean, just watch our videos. You'll find that out. We're just always like, we want more content. But here's the thing, too. The pacing of this movie, I think, is perfect. I do not think there is a single slow scene. I don't think anything is rushed. If anything, we're actually going to make a video on this because there's a fan edit. If anything, I would just want to see an extended version to where it's not. I know this is exactly what he wanted to release, but I would love to see everything drawn out a little bit.
Yeah. I
don't think the story needs it at all, but it's just such a good movie. I want to see more.
Yeah.
And so for you, pacing, I know, we watch tons of movies together, and I know you're not a fan of long movies. 2.5 hours is a long movie. And so what's the pacing like for you, and what keeps your attention as it's moving forward?
The pacing is great for me, and yeah, you're right. I don't typically like long movies, but it's weird because even the original trilogy as a little kid, those kept my attention. Like, I don't know what it is, but George knows how to keep my attention even as a little kid. And even with the prequels and the original, when I'm rewatching them now, there's a lot of stuff that I'm like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that was going on, like the political stuff. But he was still, even though I didn't fully understand what was going on, and even though we didn't have Clone Wars yet, it still kept my interest. I still understood for the most part what was happening. I could follow along. And so I think the pacing is perfect because I can say as a little girl, I could follow, and I can follow even more now as an adult.
And, I think that when we're talking about a masterpiece, I think that ties directly into his skill. And I think he has cultivated that skill, and he's practiced it. And he's learned exactly how to keep your attention. And obviously having John Williams do the score. It's amazing. This is what's so interesting about this. The whole time, you have a lot of choral ensembles and a lot of strings and a lot of horns, but everything is lower in octave. Even
we were watching with the subtitles, it's like choral voices.
Yeah. And what's so interesting, though, the way George had John Williams arrange this, everything is heavy, and that keeps the story moving. And the musical motifs in this,
beautiful,
make the musician in me and the musician in Keeley so happy.
Yeah.
Because he pulls from Phantom Menace, from Attack of the Clones. He pulls from all of the OT films, and he's just weaving everything together. So you're hearing all of these sounds that you're accustomed to, and especially the last scene of the movie. When Luke and Leia are born, the way he's pulling in all of these themes. He's pulling in Leia's theme, and he's pulling in, Luke's theme, the binary sunset theme. And when he's just overlaying these, you're just like, man, you don't have to have words. You can actually just let the music speak for itself.
Yep.
And again, it's because what he's done is he's created this depth and this vision of where he wants to go. And I'll just say, too, I think ILM and Lucasfilm did an amazing job. The film looks incredible. It looks very real. Nothing looks like cheap CGI. And, this is interesting as well. I think when we're talking about the characters, right, when we're moving past that kind of stuff and we're looking at the motivation of the characters, they all feel real to me.
Yeah, they do.
And even Grievous, his motivation feels real. And Anakin is your favorite character, and I think this is a movie about Anakin in particular. And so when we're looking at conceptual depth, what are some things that you see conceptually that Anakin is going through in this movie?
Yeah, you see a lot because you had to develop a lot in this character from this little kid to become Darth Vader. But I think the overarching theme is that he never left slavery, and he's still a slave. His master just looks different.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thought. I agree with him. I know exactly what you're talking about. Expand on that a little more. Like, what do you mean, like, his master just looks different?
I mean, it started as Watto, and then it became the Jedi Council members, and then it became Palpatine. And even, I think he's a slave to his emotions, his pride, his fear. He's constantly struggling with those things, and he's trying to find freedom, but he's, for whatever reason, pulled into, I think it's because of how he's raised. He knows how to be a slave. He doesn't know how to be free. And so he's looking for that strong master. He's looking for a father figure. And I think he was trying to find those in all of these people. Yeah,
and, I think it's so profound, what you said about, he doesn't know how to be free. Mm-hmm. He's in his pursuit of freedom. Ironically, he keeps finding himself being enslaved. Yeah. And I found it just so interesting because you see so many deep concepts around these characters and in the story. Mm-hmm. Like you see really the price of pride. Yep. And the accompanying fall. Yep. You see that particularly in Anakin. Mm-hmm. And you see, as Dooku so aptly put, that, twice the pride, double the fall. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a meme, but, I think it's actually a great example of bringing in real world religious truths, metaphysical truths, all this stuff that George would pull from, mm-hmm. and he puts it in, and it's like, that's something conceptually that's bigger than Star Wars. Yeah. When you can look at yourself and you're like, have I put that into my own life? Mm-hmm. You see this concept of deception, mm-hmm. where you think, okay, yeah, obviously Palpatine's being deceivious, or he's deceiving people. He's being deceivious. Jeez, I like that. That's a new word. But obviously he's deceiving people. There we go. But then you realize the Jedi are deceiving people. Mm-hmm. And you realize Anakin is deceiving people. I think the only really actually no, I was going to say the only pure one is Padme, but no, she's deceiving people. She's hiding things as well. Right. And you realize that there's this thin veil that's separating everybody from the truth of their lives, mm-hmm. and what they're really putting out there. Mm-hmm. You have this whole idea of espionage, this whole idea of you never really know who is watching you. Yeah. And the lengths that people will go to keep power. Yeah. One of my favorite scenes in this movie is when Anakin is sitting with Sidious, and he just knows him as Palpatine. And he's the opera? Yeah, and this whole dialogue and exchange happens. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this briefly, in terms of George and a masterpiece. Mm-hmm. Because when Palpatine basically says, is it any different with the Jedi, when Anakin is referring to the Sith only want power, they only think about themselves. And he brings up this concept, is it really different though? Mm-hmm. Are your good guys really the good guys? Mm-hmm. And I mean, when you hear that, I mean, what's your reaction? Do you think there's truth to that? Do you think it's all false deception? What do you think?
I think there's always truth to it. I do think the Jedi are the good guys, but I think they were deceived and they weren't doing things maybe the right way, but they were trying to do their best. Whereas I think Palpatine knew what he was doing, and so that's kind of it doesn't excuse obviously either. But I also think that scene's very pinnacle because you see Anakin later, you see that conversation, stirring throughout the rest of the movie. And I think that because he planted a seed in Anakin, and that when Anakin's then sitting in the Jedi Temple by himself while Mace went to confront Sidious, that's probably what he's thinking about. I don't want to lose, as if he's my only shot to learn this so I can save Padme. You know, I got to do what I got to do. And so I think Sidious was very smart in planting that seed, just dropping it and leaving it so he can dwell on it rather than explaining it, but like actually making him dwell and think about it and think about how can this happen? How can I get it? Because you know that's what Anakin was thinking about. Since he heard that, he didn't stop thinking about that.
Oh, yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And, you know, what's even fascinating to me is when we're thinking about Anakin and we're thinking about everything going on with Palpatine and the Jedi Order and the council members, and you're looking at the Separatists, all this. You see the cost of war. Yeah. Like, even a heartbreaking moment for me. Again, thinking about George and this being his masterpiece, and really thinking about this conceptual depth that comes. You have the Separatists and the Phantom Menace, who are easily hated. Yeah. I mean, who's like, yes, I side with the Separatists.
The Separatists.
Yeah. But, I mean, fans don't. I mean, anyways. You have, when the war is over, right? The war is over, and Anakin, Lord Vader now, is sent to the Separatists because Palpatine had them all gathered. Sidious did, rather, and sent them all to Mustafar. And he sends Vader there. And really, it's this dethroning of all these other powers, all these other players. Yep. And it's so tragic to me. I'm like, oh man, like I've never...
They were just used.
Felt this. And he's like, but the war is over. Why are you doing this? Please stop. Right. You know, and just cuts him in half. And it's like even the bad guys.
Well, I don't think they suck, but I don't think they're really the bad guys. Like, Palpatine was making them look like the bad guys. And so we all thought. Yeah. And then they're like, what is going on? And they get sliced, so.
And yeah, obviously Dooku, you know, had some manipulation in there as well. But it's hard when it's like the people who are doing bad things are even just like,
what's going on?
Like, the cost of war is so high, and obviously George Lucas loved using war really as this way to illustrate what's going on. Like, he loved galactic war really as a way just to paint this picture of like just the cost of real life war. Right. And you know, obviously you have the drive of love throughout this whole thing. Love just drove every single thing in this. You know, obviously anger pushed things over the edge, but you know, I think to wrap this up and to really bring this to a close, we're thinking about the vision of the prequels. I think this movie perfectly ended the prequels.
It did.
I don't think it could have been done any better. I think it adds tremendous depth to the original trilogy. Yep. And I'm impressed with the prequels in particular, that each one gets better. And that Revenge of the Sith, to me, is... I mean, I know we hold different opinions. Yours is Attack of the Clones. But to me, Revenge of the Sith is the best out of the prequels. But we both agree that this is George Lucas's masterpiece. I want to read this quote one last time, and then I would love for everyone in the comments to just enter into this discussion and let us know what you think about this very topic. So again, from Kojo Griffin on masterpieces. He says, to me, a masterpiece is the intersection of skill, practice, conceptual depth, and what I would loosely term vision, that thing which drives people to create. I think George Lucas ticks every single one of those boxes. I think obviously the original trilogy is untouched. Oh yeah. And you know, you can't reach to how that changed the landscape of filmmaking and how amazing they are. But I think when it comes to George Lucas, I think this is his masterpiece. And so, you know what? I think that's good. We're at 20 minutes now. This is like a podcast style at this point. But you know what? We are two Star Wars nerds. If you have not subscribed to us already, hit that red subscribe button. And we just want to say, may the Force be with you always.